Hello, good evening, and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. As you can probably tell, Alex isn't with us this evening, but we do have Lara Davenport-Ray. So we, in fact, have two Greens on the panel.
The more Greens, the merrier.
Yeah, I should just point out that my shirt is not an endorsement, or my top, rather. Neither is Martin's t-shirt. Anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome particularly Lara. So we've got three things we're going to talk about this evening. Stephen joining the Green Party. Very briefly, we're going to talk about the consultations going on for local government reorganisation. And then we're going to go on to the happenings today at Westminster and the resignation of Morgan McSweeney, and so on. So let's start with Stephen joining the Greens. Stephen, you've joined the Greens.
Stephen, have you joined the Greens?
Yeah. I should just start by I mean I want to hear why genuinely I want to know why the Greens, why now. I seem to recall you both in public and in conversations for quite some years, Stephen, talking about the problems with political parties, and you are rightly well known as an independent. So over to you.
I'm surprisingly embarrassed with you guys now, despite the fact actually. So you were two of the people, the only two people I really talked about it to before it happened. Obviously, I talked to Lara because, in the old
I'm glad you talked about me about it before it happened. Thank you.
But Lara's like my handling agent for the defection. So when I handed in my surrender, Lara accepted the surrender, and there's lots of things that have come into this decision. And you're right to say that I've spent most of my political career trolling you guys for being party political and being anti-party political. But it's got to, firstly, I was considering standing in the May elections. Part of me wanted to stand down because it's been a long time, but there's lots going on in the world which makes me think that it's time for people like me to stand up. So the rise of reform is a big one, but also all the inequality stuff. And actually at HDC across the last few months, 6 months to a year, has actually been quite interesting and quite fun, and we've delivered loads of stuff. But I wanted to carry on. But so Lara has been trying to recruit me to the Greens for many, many years, yeah. And I tell every time I talk to anybody about Lara, I will say that we had quite a rocky relationship, start to our friendship, because
which is not how I remember it.
Lara stood against me in 2021 for county council when she was kind of a paper candidate, but not really a paper candidate. And I won by 9 votes then, and it could have been that Lara, I don't know how many votes you got, Lara, but you finished maybe 3rd or 4th on the ballot.
300 maybe.
Yeah. And that nearly cost me the election. And it wasn't that I was upset at Lara, but I just felt really threatened by her by a long time, because I was just aware that I was sitting on this 9-vote majority in my county council seat, and there was this rising star who would gobble up those 9 votes easily. And would cost me my seat. Which those calculations were bizarre, because I thought I would be, standing up against the Conservatives. It turned out actually that last year I didn't stand for county council. Lara stood in this seat, and I endorsed Lara. And so, in terms of kind of the thinking process, I think the way that people get recruited into political parties is sometimes in steps. So, a good friend of mine was Richard West, who was a long-standing Conservative councillor. Yeah. Richard West was a Liberal Democrat. Yeah, the Liberal Democrats offered to ask him to deliver leaflets. They never delivered any, so he delivered leaflets to the Conservatives instead. So when I moved to this flat, Lara said to me, she brought pizza around the first day I moved in, so she bribed me with pizza. Exactly. And then she just dropped in, now you live here, would you mind doing some leaflets for me? I'm like, yeah, Lara's my mate. I'll do that. Last May as well, I endorsed Lara, and she invited me to the count, which, again, that was a difficult thing. It wasn't difficult for me to do because I love being at the count. I love supporting Lara. But when I arrive at the count, Lara gives me a green rosette, yeah? And that's a really hard thing for me to do. Yeah, because especially because Tom Sanderson, who's leader of the other independents, had been photographed wearing yellow rosette, and we, part of the reason we split off with him because he's been photographed in the yellow rosette, and suddenly I'm wearing a green rosette at the count. And Laura said to me the other day, "Did that feel good?" And like, no, it didn't, but I owned it because I went and photographed myself with every single Conservative. Like, look, I took selfies, so I owned it, and that was part of it. And being part of that process, and Laura lost by a handful of votes, and it was nice to be on her team, and being part of that team was a big part of it. Even, December, we were talking about it. Laura asked me again, and I said no.
We kept saying no.
Yeah, we had a meeting around my flat with some of the independents as well, talking about not we were doing deals with it, but just talking about local politics. And that night I said, I'd like to do it, but I can't do it because I think I'd lose too much face. And because of this whole it's my whole brand. And then, I don't know, sometime in December, I was out delivering Laura's leaflets. I pulled a green woolly hat on for a laugh for a group photo in her delivery round, and it was only a joke. But actually, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to leave. I'm representing Laura, so I'm going to leave it on, and it actually felt quite nice. I think that was a big step in it. And I think the other big thing about it, so during the general election, I stood against Catherine Fisher, who I beat, the Green candidate, who I beat by a handful of votes. So I was in hustings with Catherine for 7.5 hours. Yeah, and in 7.5 hours, we never disagreed once. And I actually thought, so in terms of policy and the sorts of things that Green stand for, obviously I was always aligned with most of it. Yeah, I've always been a pragmatic environmentalist in my work and in my life. But actually, I think that with Zach Polanski and the kind of focus on social justice and the more left-wing ideology, Laura getting me to listen to Rest is Politics, where Zach Polanski describes himself as a socialist, and just the fact that, in 4 years on cabinet, the best councillor has been Laura, and one of the people I look up to in local politics is Laura. So all those things made it quite easy for me in the end to make a decision. It was still a big step. So I mean, did you expect me? I think I defected you in the car, Laura. You didn't think you expected at that stage?
No, you had told me no days before, and so I thought, okay.
It was literally walking around the streets, thinking I've got to campaign here myself soon. Yeah, if I'm going to campaign, I've got to do my leaflets. I've got to do it all by myself. None of my friends are going to stand again. So if I get elected, I'm going to probably be the only independent in St Neots and one of a handful of.
Yeah, I know what that feels like.
Yeah, but you did it by yourself. But it's but you've got people around you, and I had people around me for general election. But even during general election, it was always all on my shoulders. And it just seemed like just a better fit. And, there's nothing I really disagree with. I agree with almost everything the Green Party say. And I just thought maybe now's the time. And I think genuinely, 4 years ago was a special time when Conservatives were doing really badly in the polls, and lots of independents got in all over the place. I don't think we had any independent councils at all. HDC should have technically been an independent council. I think we had the most in the joint administration. We had 10 Lib Dems, and we never led the council because we could never get ourselves together. And so it's an opportunity. Go on.
If we look back over your political career, so we're talking about 8-9 years now, the policies that I think you often reference back to that you're most proud of and that you're most well known for all fit within Green Party policy. So I don't think it wasn't a difficult policy decision. I hope that helped along the way.
No, it did. You did. I think you chipped away at me over the years. You did not deliberately, but also inspired me. You know what I mean? Maybe it was deliberate. I don't know. Maybe.
I have to say, well, this, but it didn't hugely surprise me. I have to say, I've known and I've felt that's where you were most politically aligned. And in fact, you asked me that question when I did the podcast at your place, didn't you? And I said,
guess.
If you were going to do it, I think you'd join the Greens. And that's when you first told me you were going to do it. And I was very good, didn't tell anybody. But so it obviously didn't surprise me when you made the decision. But it didn't surprise me when you told me either. I have to say, I think politically it's probably where you belong at the moment.
Yeah.
And Stephen, what has the response been like from, I don't know, your constituents or?
Almost entirely positive. I was nervous about it. One thing that happened is that I think like a day I told you all like on a Monday, and on Wednesdays when we got the letter from Stephen Reid saying we could cancel the election, And that was a bit of a shock, because having made this mental decision and said I'm going to do for it, suddenly we were thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to wait. I've got another 2 years of doing this, and I couldn't have done that. I wouldn't have defected, whether that's the right word or not, and then sat in my seat for 2 years. So if that had happened, if we had to cancel elections, I don't know what the balloons are about. Don't know.
Congratulations.
If the elections had been cancelled, I would have resigned and sought re-election as a Green, because I think that's the right thing to do. So yeah, the timing was good, and I'm really relieved that the elections are going.
I think the difficulty for you, I think, is going to come if the Labour Party, which it might, takes a big step to the left, because I think a lot of Green policies and Labour policies will become very, very similar. Obviously, the Greens have obviously got the obvious differentiation, which is the environmental and sustainability agenda. But, a lot of the Labour Party are there as well. And I think that's going to be difficult for you. I also think the time when you're going to get flack is when you next stand for election, because I think people will start making up reasons for why you defected. And putting them through letterboxes, and you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, but I you know what? I think you just have to own it, and I'm a big enough figure in St Neots that I do own all those things. I've seen there hasn't been so in terms of the flack, people in general have been highly supportive. I told you two guys, because I trust you and I value your opinion. So I told David was almost the first person after Lara I told, apart from partner, and David gave me some interesting, honest feedback, and I didn't know how it was going to go. And the trouble was, I was prepared to do it on my birthday, which was the 28th, but John Elworthy leaked it the day before, which meant the whole thing was chaotic. But I could see that it was, across Cambridgeshire, it was a relatively big.
Just out of interest, you don't have to say this, but how did John find out?
Because we
embargoed press release.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a question for you, Stephen, in the chat. So now, as a Green, how do you feel about the idea of pulling out of NATO and abandoning Trident in a fairly dangerous world?
Do you know what? In terms, I'm not here to solve geopolitical decisions. I can't at the moment. Yeah. So I'm interested. Look, I think nothing is working at the moment. The whole of the old world order is broken, and we need new solutions. Yeah. And given that Trident doesn't work when we tested it, and we spend a lot of money on it, I think there's definitely a case for looking at it and cancelling it. Pulling out of NATO, I just don't know. I'm a local politician, and I have.
What happens when you disagree with Green Party policy?
Get thrown out, and I'll become an independent again. You don't know the hit. So the other thing is, so I have been courted by other political parties in the past. The Lib Dems, have courted me, and I've talked to Lib Dems a lot of times over the years about potentially becoming a Lib Dem, especially ahead of the general election, when they didn't want me standing against Ian Sollum. And, there's been several times that they've courted me, and I've had conversations, and I've never done it. So it's not something that's new. I think, if Labour, different Labour Party, had caught me in the past, I might well have done it. I mean, the only two people I've ever campaigned for who are not independents are Lara and Nick Johnson, And so if Nick, if it was still like the Nick Johnson Labour Party of 8 or 9 years ago, I might well have joined Labour. And I think that's part of it. So that's don't know where I was going with that, but so it's not a completely new idea. Although I've always been independent, I was always open to doing it, and I think I've always been a man of the left. And I think in a different world, like you say, with Labour swinging to the left, I might well have been a Labour. Like in the Tony Blair, I was a member of the Labour Party, early in the Blair administration until the Gulf War thing for a few years, and I quit. So that's the only time I've been a member of the political party.
1997 when I joined the Conservative Party when Blair first got elected, actually, and that was why. Yeah, but I'm glad you found a political home for yourself, because I've always felt there was one. And, it's one of the things I struggle with. I do not believe there's a political home for me at the moment. No. And it's it's a big issue. There's no political party I can sit and look at and go, there for me.
But this is how I feel having done it. Yeah. So I haven't had a single regret. So the response has been 98, 99% positive. I've had a few people who sent me messages which quite upset me. 2 people, in fact, which I haven't responded to yet. about certain issues.
Are they people you know, or are they people?
Yeah, no, people I respect. If I didn't respect them, they're friends. Yeah,
yeah.
One of whom is a Jewish friend. He's not Jewish; he's Israeli. But yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, and another one was talking about trans rights and stuff. And both those I didn't enjoy those things. But apart from that, it's been almost entirely positive. And lots of people who've supported me. Look, lots of people who supported me voted for Lara anyway during the May elections. They're the same sort of people.
Yeah.
And the main thing that I felt since joining is that I've realised that being independent. Now I've got friends like Ben Pitt and Richard Slade and those guys around me, but they're always still independents, and it's bloody lonely. And I was the first one that got elected to a higher authority, so I was by myself for a year. Yeah, and it's been lonely, and it's not lonely anymore because I've got, Lara and I had great fun with Sam yesterday out filming in town and doing stuff together.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but it's nice. It's nice to be part of something, and I genuinely, they've made me feel really welcome, and I can relax a bit because I can do the stuff that I'm good at, with not having to focus on organising everything for the campaign. You've got more people, so I don't regret it for a minute. I think it's a good time for the Greens, and the main thing is that since the general election, I haven't enjoyed politics. And you should be able to see from my social media for the first time, I'm really excited again and excited about campaigning. So, and even if I don't get in, if I don't get in May,
that's one of the things I find interesting. I am to a certain extent enjoying my politics now that I've sort of set political allegiances to a certain extent to one side. I will always have political allegiances to certain elements of conservatism. I always will, but most of those are centre ground conservative ideals. But I really enjoy what I feel is a much and it's I would say it's much more independence of thought. And that's not to say you don't have independence of thought when you belong to a political party, but your ability to express it is difficult.
But we'll see. We'll see, and that's so. So you are allowed to disagree. We'll see how.
No, I'm absolutely sure that's.
And there's no whip as well, which is
the party that are worst at that. Well, I think Reform are probably the worst at it, but they won't tell you it. But the ones that are worst out of it, that I think it becomes very, very clear, is the Lib Dems.
Yeah. But no, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's quite a lot that to pick up on, and we'll be coming back to Morgan McSweeney later. There has been an issue within Labour over the past few years that any disagreement is seen as what I've been saying, it's been seen as dissent rather than as data. The people haven't been taking on, and I think that is why we've had some of the problems we've had. And that's true. I think that's true down from the sort of very local all the way up to Westminster with not being able to get legislation through. Firstly, the party should have realised that was going to be a problem, but also the only response, has been to remove the whip from people. Even and one which is a slightly sore point. I know Marcus Campbell Savers. We used to be in the same constituency Labour Party in London. He was thrown out and then had the whip removed, and then the party basically changed its mind. That is difficult. But I'm just going to.
Yeah, I just say parties have to be careful about this, because this is part of what went wrong with the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson just kicked people out of the party, removed the whip from them, all this stuff, and they were all pretty much one nation. And it meant, because they didn't have a party whip at the time of the general election, they couldn't stand as Conservatives. And the end result of that was the Conservative Party. That's part of the reason why the Conservative parties drift to the right might not be retrievable, is because a lot of those people that were of a sort of one nationist ilk, and that were a reasonable level of influence in the party, were got rid of.
There's another question for Stephen in the chat. Stephen, would you consider being a Green candidate for the Combined Authority Mayor in 2029?
Well, the Greens didn't put a candidate forward in the last election, and so
yes, we did.
Did they? Did they? Who was it? Oh, Bob. What's his name?
Sorry, maybe that's a reflection of our comms.
No, I think I talked to you at one stage that they weren't going to, were they? And he didn't do very well. Would I consider doing that in the future? Would I consider standing for Parliament? Standing for Parliament really, really hurt me. Really did. So would I consider doing it again? Possibly, yeah. I would. All of those things.
Well, and now that you're the member of a party, the question is, would the party select you as their candidate?
And that's a big issue because I think that the Green Party has a preference for less middle-aged white old man. So I don't know, but that's not a reason for me doing this. Yeah, and if I was to enjoy myself and find those opportunities coming up to me, because I'm 54 last week or the week before. And so I'm coming towards the end of my working career.
You're an old man.
And so possibly I would like to do one of those things. The part of the thing is, as an independent, yeah. So when I was first elected to town council 8 years ago, every single level of government above me was conservative and staunchly conservative. And I could never imagine even getting elected to another authority. The fact that in that time I've been mayor twice, chair of the county council twice, and been on the cabinet for 4 years, I've done, apart from being leader of HDC, yeah, which I think there was a possibility that it could have been me at some stage. I think Sarah's done a much better job than I would have done, if I'm honest. Yeah, but I could have done that. But there's nothing else for me to do, is there? I tried to stand for Parliament. I did take it absolutely as far as I could have taken it. And so what else is there to do? If I'd got elected in May as an independent, which I think I would have, I would have been a backbencher.
I think
no authority, and it would have been.
I think the point being, as a Green, the circumstances that would surround you in terms of standing for Parliament, standing for mayor, are very, very different. Because the thing that I told you was, as an independent during a parliamentary campaign, people just forget you exist because they're focused on the mainstream parties, and you've got to hope that by the time the next general election comes, the Green Party, if you stand, but even as a Green Party member, that the Green Party are still relevant and are considered a mainstream party. I mean, that's true whether you stand or not, isn't it?
But so and on the Parliament thing, so the combined authority mayor is a big thing. Yeah, it's a really big job. It's a job, actually. I think that I would be quite well equipped for, because I think I've got a history, and I'm a relatively well-known figure in Cambridgeshire politics. So possibly, yeah. But I'm not going to announce any candidature. But in terms of standing for Parliament again, the skills you learn during the things that I enjoyed doing were things like hustings, yeah. And now you're getting questions on NATO I can't answer because I'm not prepared yet. But when you're match fit, yeah, those things, the intellectual, the ability to do those things. So I'd love to try and do those.
You would also have a party machine that would help to educate you and pull out your own views about that. By nature of being a party member, you're attending local meetings where you're going to be talking about nothing else but politics, whether it's NATO or whether it's potholes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reality to that as well. Are you going to tell me now, Lara, Green Party meetings aren't like that?
It depends on which meeting. But I think, keep in mind that there are lots of potential Green mayoral candidates across Cambridgeshire.
Yeah.
You talked about Catherine Fisher, who you ran against for Parliament. What an impressive person. We've got Greens in Peterborough who have been doing really interesting things on Peterborough Council.
So
anything could happen.
Absolutely.
But I don't think Stephen has said it's a given that he will stand anyway.
No,
exactly.
No, it's not. It's absolutely, at this stage, yeah. I have no ambition in that direction, but I don't rule anything out for the future. Yeah, and I'm not going to announce today that I'm going to stand for anything at the moment. Yeah, I want to get elected to HDC as a Green. Yeah, which might not happen. But the other thing is, if I don't get elected, so it's like if I don't get elected in May, yeah, I'm going to stick around though, because actually the other thing about being in the party is I can get involved in some of the campaigning and some of the strategy, and those things appeal to me as much as anything else as well, because I think I'm quite good at those things. So we'll just see. And it occurs to me as well, there hasn't been in since I've been involved in Cambridgeshire politics, there's been a few kind of low level, defections that never get much press. But in terms of like somebody who's in an executive position, I don't think that's happened before. And so I don't know what's happened with the Blues again. But part of the issue is that
because that word defection. So Stephen, being on the district council, had to align himself with a political group to be recognized as a group. So he's not just an independent on the council; he was a Cambridgeshire independent group member.
Yeah.
So he had to resign his affiliation to that in order to be recognized as a Green councillor. So if we say defect, that's the only way in which he has defected.
But so this is one of the interesting things, because you can you can be an independent, and we have this independent moment where you can do to a large extent you can do what you want, the way you want, and so on. Joining your party, you get sort of the institutional support on a, sort of as a personal person who's a candidate or an elected office. You get that institutional support, but there's a trade-off, in that there is a party line of some description. Lara will say in a moment that the Green Party doesn't whip, and I will point out that there are other ways of applying social pressure.
And I would say that their Green Party goes about things quite different than other parties in very little ways that make a big difference. Mm-hmm. For example, Stephen and I now form the Green Group on Huntingdonshire District Council. That means that even when we go in, the two of us, to vote for something, we don't have to vote the same way. It means that we try to make decisions collectively. We don't technically have a leader of the group. We don't like the word leader. We have a convener of a group who brings us together to talk about things and think about how we're going to do it.
How do we choose that, Lara?
See, this is where I start. Getting antsy. Political groups, whether they're 2, 3, 4, 5 people, they need leadership, and to call them something else other than a leader is absolutely irrelevant. They're still a leader.
Well, it's a bit easier when there's 2 of us and we're both on cabinet.
Yeah.
The way that we decided the leadership.
Until you get to vote on who's going to be leader.
This is official.
We already did.
We already did, and this is official Green Party policy. But
no, it's not.
Lara beat me in a board game.
I did beat him. That's not official policy.
I have
I take your criticism there, Martin, with in the way that you mean it. I know that you're not saying that very negatively, but I think it's important that grown-ups talk to each other in a grown-up way. Politicians, whatever color they are, they come into the room, they're not going to agree. Why would they agree? Why would any group of people agree on 100% of things? And I think that this way of approaching it is much more mature.
Okay, but there is also a point that I believe that 80 to 90% of politicians agree on 80 to 90% of things. And so it's the 10%. And it's also, you look in Parliament and you look at the work that select committees do in Parliament, rarely gets talked about. There's a huge amount of agreement behind the scenes. That used to be true at the county council when we used to have advisory boards and stuff like that informed the cabinet. There was huge amounts of agreement that went on. It was only the bit in full council really where it got particularly bad. I do think that changed, and I think the committee system was part of that. But are
you saying there's good things about committee systems, Martin?
No, absolutely the opposite. I think the committee system brought to the fore and made political disagreement a much more a thing than it was before, when we had scrutiny and when we had advisory groups, because there wasn't as much political focus on a media focus on those committees, and it was very, very hard for parties to write headlines around the activities of those committees. Happened sometimes around scrutiny, but not often, and that's something people have to understand. And part of what sorry, I'm going to put a plug in here, but part of what my podcast is about, which I'm going to call it's find it on YouTube, it's at Change from the Centre, is all about the fact that there's a lot of agreement on things that never ever happen within politics. Mm-hmm. There are more people support and move towards proportional representation than support any political party. Far more people.
The last 6 months of HDC is a case study in that, because all of a sudden we all agreed on, well, almost all agreed on a local government reorganisation option, almost all agreed in the end after lots of lobbying about not cancelling the elections. And so there's been, you know, and I think part of my journey across the last 4 years is that when I was elected to HDC, because of the way I've been treated by people like Ryan Fuller, I was rabidly anti-Tory, yeah. And 4 years later, you know, people like Simon Bywater and Tim Alban and Andy Jennings and even Ross are my friends, and I'll happily get. I remember sitting in the pub when we were sat in the pub on the first meetings and see the Conservatives walk into the other side of the pub, and I was almost sneering. And so here's the other thing: is I always, when I stood for Parliament, I had this whole thing about tribalism, and actually, for at least the first 3 years of HTC, the most tribalistic person was me. And I still am for the theatre part of it because I quite enjoy it. But actually, behind the scenes, like most of the time, I agree with most of the people. There's very few things I can think of that we would have disagreed with, and not like huge policy things like green bins, perhaps, across the last 4 years. And I've grown up a lot.
The things we really need to have debates and falling outs over are not around the Mandelson thing, because everybody's bloody horrified by Mandelson. I know we're going to come on to this later, but everybody's horrified by that. You know, the things we don't talk about are the fact that we've got an education system that's 150 years old and is not fit for the modern world. You know, that's the thing we should be falling out for and having arguments about. Not not the petty stuff. You know, everybody's upset about potholes, whatever political party you are. You know, so why are we all falling out and pointing fingers at each other about potholes? Let's talk about the things that really bloody matter.
But the other thing is that the thing that, especially with the Conservatives at HTC, and this kind of happened at the May count when I went to with Lara, is I got genuinely upset by some decent Conservative councillors, losing their seats to Reform councillors who subsequently haven't shown up. And I think the threat of reform, yeah, brings us all together a bit. I know that we've all got our different policies, but you know.
But there are people on the right, not necessarily Reform Party members, that would say similar things about the threats from the Greens.
They should be very scared.
Yeah, but that that is the nature of it. There are a lot of Conservatives absolutely terrified about socialism, and
good
to a certain extent.
So yesterday, Stephen and I took a walk around St. Neots with our colleague Sam, just to talk to people who live in St. Neots and ask their opinion on lots of different things. And we asked quite a few of them about reform. We now have a few councils that are led by reform and their thoughts about council tax and some of the promises that were made. And I was really surprised how no support that we heard. And I don't think that's just because of the people that we stopped. We talked to quite a wide variety of demographics.
Well, I think reform has gone past its peak. I think they've started to get more scrutiny, and I think that scrutiny is starting to tell. You know, at a local level, in a number of different places, it's hard to see how they're delivering, and it's hard to see how they're making a difference. No,
I think one of the things that Reform are running into, well, two things. One is that it's easy to say that politics is easy. You know, actually it isn't. But the other is that there are some really big structural problems in the UK. Big ones, but also in how local government works and is funded, that can't be solved by local government, that are issues for national government. And they've been talking, saying, an awful lot of, we can come in and we won't have to raise your council tax, and then realizing that actually that is that's just not reality.
But I've said it a number of times that local government is basically a political wing of national government. It's there to do it's there to do the bidding of national government, but with a slightly political side to it, and that's a reality. You look at
I don't disagree with you at all, Martin, but I think I think a lot of people have come in and thought, that actually there is power, that they can do lots of things, and actually they can't, but also that the stakes are really high. When you're dealing with looked after children, for instance, or adult social care, not that other things aren't important, but those are like, actually we really need to get this right. So I think that's been I think that has been, you know, a surprise for some people.
So can I give an example of that quickly? Sorry, Lara. So I used the word people are scared of reform, which is not the right word. But this week, so I took through overview and scrutiny, I'm taking a paper through, which is going to basically put care leavers from Cambridgeshire and victims of domestic abuse to the top of the housing register. It's a paper which was completely supported by everybody on scrutiny, especially by people like Simon Bywater, who has always campaigned for care leavers. But there was a small clause in that saying next time we take one of these decisions, we're going to make it an executive decision, you know, because they're small little things, and you know they're easy to get through. And I must have taken 20 of those through ONS, and nobody said anything previously. All of a sudden, the ONS committee are nervous about giving us more executive powers because, you know, after May, I'm probably not going to be the portfolio holder. It might be a reform portfolio holder. And all the good stuff we've done, like we've got an empty houses officer, we've got council tax support, we've got this new, you know, care leavers policy, all those things could easily be undone, if they're executive decisions. So ONS were getting, you know, nervous, and I don't blame them. We have to talk about that cabinet on Tuesday because it's an interesting point, I think.
Yeah. I was just going to talk about, I think it was last week, in Kent County Council, which is reform-led, their cabinet member for finances resigned after he was quoted in the press saying that he had assumed he was going to find lots of things to cut, and there just wasn't there. Like there weren't any extravagant things that he was expecting.
But everybody told them that before the election.
Exactly.
Everybody said, you know.
So suddenly this is a surprise.
Yeah.
So can I just put, the thing is, people who were politically involved I think there is still a perception that there is a lot of waste, you know, in government generally and in local government in particular. And I think the fact that you've had people come in who are reform and said, oh, actually, there isn't lots of waste, it in a way is helpful. You know, things are, you know, I don't think people know that there have been lots of cuts generally, but don't appreciate how many of that, or what a large proportion of those cuts have fallen on local government.
Yeah, no,
the services that local government provide.
If you go back and look at during the peak period where austerity was at its highest, you look at where the cuts happened, and it was I think you look at the cuts across government departments, and to a very, very huge extent, in percentage terms, it was local government. To be fair to Eric Pickles, yes, he did see local government get slammed, but he was also the only minister that cut his own department to the same level. Yeah.
So I mean, this is the, and I think the other thing is sort of the damage that's been done by those cuts is going to take an awful long time to fix, even if funding went back to it. So, for instance, the classic one is potholes. I think I'm right in saying, you three will know better than I, that part of the reason that maintenance budgets for highways have been cut is there ain't no money, and there's still statutory obligations that have to be met. More complicated than that in some cases, peat roads, all the rest of it.
Yeah, there are inevitably going to be other reasons, and you know, I am told, I don't know for definite, but I am told that one of the reasons why the Fens peat roads are so bad is because the county council, they are realigned and redistributed funding away from Fenland towards Cambridge, towards sort of Cambridge, other areas of Cambridgeshire, and the reason for that is Fenland got a disproportionate amount of funding. But the reason Fenland got disproportionate amount of funding was because of peat roads and the issues we face. So you're right on that. What I would argue, and this is not the fault of local government, is that the things that have the potential to save money are things where you need to be taking a long-term view. Adult social care is one of them. I think there's no doubt about that. The other one, well, looked after children is another one. You know, the outcomes for looked after children and children in care in our country is absolutely disgraceful, and it costs the state money further down the road. You know, if we are going to become parents of young children, then we have to make sure that as a parent, we aspire for those children to become fantastic citizens. And if we put policy behind those ambitions, we'll save money, because those people won't become the victims of grooming gangs, because they'll have the self-confidence to deal with the idiots that, I'm trying not to swear here, that groom them. We won't have a hugely disproportionate number of children in care going into our prison systems. And I could talk about our prison system and what we could save there, for hours. And those are the areas, and that is the neglect of national government, because they're too busy, partly caused by the media. So I'm having a proper rant here, dealing with political scandals rather than having decent national debate about policy change.
Well, this is the thing. We spend too much time talking about politics and not enough about policy. I think it might be, on that note, an idea to very briefly move on to local government reorganisation. It's a bit like waiting for Godot, except that it appears that Godot has got a little bit closer. What is the latest? We're only going to talk about this for a couple of minutes.
So the latest is that the Secretary of State has received all of the preferences of all the constituent councils and has begun a public consultation to see what the public thinks about those options. And so I hope everyone who's watching will go online and share their opinion on that.
I'm going to share the link now in the chat.
Yeah, please.
When Stephen and I were doing a walk around town with Sam, who I think is watching, that was the other thing we asked them about, is their thoughts about local government reorganization. And again, I was surprised, because even the people who I asked, who I thought I knew they were going to say, yeah, Peterborough sounds all right. Now they felt like at least the St. Neots area had a closer link with Cambridge, or there were lots of different reasons why they didn't like there was lots of unitary option.
Lots of people like the idea of independence, didn't they? I'm not sure those are very informed opinions.
Right.
St. Neots is big enough to be its own council. Was a common comment. But there was like, and I think that's true across the whole of HDC, and almost everybody I've spoken to is nobody's really in favour of us joining with Peterborough. And given that I work in Peterborough, I released a video yesterday when I basically, talked about the social, economic, and political problems in Peterborough. But all those are true, and I think that they rub off more on me because we hear more about it. But I don't think anybody feels any affinity with Peterborough at all, and so it's not a popular decision with local people, or it's not a popular option with local people anyway.
So I haven't commented yet, and I'm going to, and I'm going to disappoint a few people, including Alex. I won't support option E, partly for me because the savings, part of the issue is the savings you make from creating two unitaries, I think are greater, and the fact that you're creating 3 local authorities that will look after adult social care just doesn't make sense. And yes, you can talk about creating trusts, overarching trusts that go over the top of all 3 authorities, which is effectively what happened in Northamptonshire. But boy, did they struggle with that, and to a certain extent are still struggling, but not as much as they were.
Do you know which one you are going to support, Martin? You're going to declare yet?
No, I'm going to go through the options and have a look again. I would probably go for an option that splits Huntingdonshire into 2.
So that's D is the only one.
Yeah, but I wouldn't support D either. I would say it's probably, I think it's option A, where you've got Fenland, Peterborough, and Huntingdonshire, but allow the southern part of Huntingdonshire, but not splitting at Godmanchester because that's stupid. Into Cambridge.
What do you?
You've invented option D now.
Yeah, you invented a new option F. But Martin, what is the feeling on the ground in Fenland? Do residents care? Do you residents?
Well,
know what's happening?
What I'm not seeing, and it might be because I've not looked, but I don't think so, because I'm getting my Facebook feed and I look at every single council on Facebook quite a lot in Cambridgeshire. I'm not getting council posts from Fenland encouraging people to take part in the consultation. That doesn't surprise me. And, please, Fenland councillors, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. But if I'm right, start kicking people's backsides and tell them what bin lorries can be used for.
So
because you can advertise on the side of bin lorries if you want to. But get out there and start pushing it. I'm not seeing it. The conversations I'm having, people don't want to become part of Peterborough. But I think that's because Peterborough's seen as a bit of a basket case of a council, and there's some stories floating around that are really, really uncomfortable at the moment because they point to corruption. And I think all that stuff. But what you've got to look at is not what things are now, but what they have the potential to be. And the thing I like about Peterborough is at least they've got some ambition. And I don't see any of that in Fenland. And I want to be part of, and I want to be a resident of a council that has real ambition for its residents. And I just don't see it. And so for me, any change is going to be good for Fenland.
I'm going to abuse the chair slightly and give myself the last word. It'll be interesting to see how people feel about if we get an independent Huntingdonshire, how people will feel about it if it means that their council tax is higher than somewhere else. So we've talked about local government reorganisation a lot, and doubtless we'll come back onto it.
Can I say one more thing though? So in terms of kind of in Huntingdonshire at least, almost every senior political figure is campaigning for an option E, apart from Ian Sollum, our MP, who is silent, which I've complained about as well. But like, so Ross Martin has shared my video today. I've shared Ross's, I shared Alex's. And so, you know, party political boundaries, a bit like Brexit, I think, have disappeared. And we're all kind of fighting on, well, at the moment, we're all fighting on the same side mostly. And that's quite a nice thing as well. And so it's good to see that. It's good to see people campaigning together despite their political allegiances.
Yes, agreed. So we'll move on to the situation at Westminster, if we may. I think the first thing to say, the most important thing to say, is that although we're going to be talking about the politics of it, the UK politics, the what we're talking about here ultimately is the root of this is the organised abuse of women and girls over a period of years, and I think it is important to say that. And although we're going to, although we are here going to be focusing on the political implications in the UK, it is the victims of Epstein and the people who collaborated with Epstein that I think we want to particularly sort of bear in mind or have in our hearts as we talk about this, and that there is a real issue here that a lot of people seem so far to have gotten away with this. In the UK, when the most recent batch of Epstein documents were released by the United States Congress, it became apparent that Peter Mandelson was still in touch with Epstein after he had been released from prison he'd been in there for a lesser charge which had been arranged than he might have been prosecuted for. So that's the main thing, and also that that Mandelson had been passing almost contemporaneous accounts of what was going on in government during the Brown ministry to Epstein. There's been lots of calls for Keir Starmer to resign. I did say myself that I thought, what I actually said was that he should consider returning the seals of office, because I am nothing if not pretentious. And Morgan McSweeney, who has been his chief of staff and was sort of the guru behind the elections, today gave his sort of resigned from his office. So that's where we are. I'll open it to the floor first. What do people think?
Okay, I'm going to put my populist hat on. Taking into account all of the caveats, which I totally agree with David there, The reality is, we all agree that they should resign, and that in fact, people on the ground would view this as our wealth divide grows. This is a conversation that's happening between rich people who run our country, and they have everyday lives that they worry about, and they have everyday concerns and things that are not being fixed by our government. Just like Martin mentioned before, we don't need to see our politicians at that level being talked about in the news constantly, again and again, about the same topics. We agree he should go. Move on to the things that they can legislate. They're going to help that the people on the ground, whether it's education or it's health, or if he's going, go. Let's have a new leader of the party, and let's start talking about the realities of what.
I mean, I'm going to be a complete and utter hypocrite here, and I'll say this now. I think every single politician in the world is a hypocrite to a certain extent, because you deal with so many different conflicting issues. But I do. This is an issue that we should be talking about. And it is something that the media should be talking about. My problem is with it from the media perspective is there are other things they should be talking about and giving as much credence to. But the issue here, and this is part of the reason why our country needs to become a much, much bigger meritocracy. Its ambition should be to be a complete meritocracy. That's potentially what the ultimate outcome from one nationism would be, in my view. But you have to look at this. You can't just look at it in isolation and say Epstein bad guy, Mandelson complete idiot for believing him and for falling for him. Excuse me. But you then have to say Cyril Smith.
But that's it, isn't it?
Excuse me while I die.
It's all of these allegations, no matter how absurd they sound when you hear them, lots of them turn out to be true, and so you have to take them all at face value. And I can remember
but you can't take them individually at face value.
No, but you have to treat the people who are making the allegations with dignity and respect, and treat the allegations as if they could be true. Because none of this stuff with Savile, with Epstein, with any of these people, lots of people have been listened to and neglected and had their concerns poo-pooed because nobody could believe this stuff. And I don't want to be. So I was listening to the rest of politics like last week, and the second half was about child sexual exploitation, and I'm embarrassed to say I switched it off because I didn't want to hear it, man, because I couldn't listen to it. It upset me too much. No. And those kind of things is we have to embrace that this shit is really real, and as much as we pretend it's not happening, it really is.
But it's also clear that, and this is sorry for interrupting, Stephen, because this is really important. It's also clear that there are people that knew Cyril Smith was a bad un while he was in office,
and that's the problem. It's
also knew that Jimmy Savile was a bad un while he was in office. Okay, not in office, but you know what I mean.
There were people who knew that Peter Mandelson was a bad un well before he was appointed to be the ambassador.
I'm going to jump in there, and say there are not allegations that Peter Mandelson did anything of the same kind as Cyril Smith or Jimmy Savile.
No, but he took a £373,000 loan from Jeffrey Robinson, and he took a £75,000 loan. I think it was a loan from apparently from Epstein. So
So I just want to be clear. I'm not trying to. I just don't want us to get sued for anything. Although, as somebody said, in order to be sued for libel, you have to have a reputation that's capable of being damaged.
We've got to start creating a system where we've not got this meritocracy at the top, which is this sounds really socialist, I think, some of this, but to make an argument that is part of the reason why these things are not dealt with until they have to be dealt with.
So I think there is a difference with Epstein to Mandelson, with Mandelson and Epstein, or to Cyril Smith or Jimmy Savile. Epstein had been convicted and gone to prison, and there were whispers and rumors and so on about Cyril Smith and about Jimmy Savile, but not in the same way as as they are with Epstein. Not justifying, but I think it is. I agree with the point you're making that it needs to be easier to.
I can't sit here in northwest Cambridgeshire, northeast Cambridgeshire, and not throw Clement Freud's name into that as well. The fact that Clement Freud was a bad one was something that didn't come to light until after he died.
Yeah.
And there are still people in northeast Cambridgeshire that say he was a good MP. No, he wasn't. He was a bloody. Excuse me, I'm going to rant.
No.
Yeah. I'm
So
going to back up a little bit now.
So we've got there's the issue there. I think it would be useful in terms of what we can add to discuss and shape a couple of things. One is what happens now for the Labour Party.
Martin, earlier you said you thought it might be moving left. Do you think that comes with the new Prime Minister?
It depends on who they pick. The Labour Party have got a bit of a problem. I think Starmer's days are done. I've thought that for a little while now, and I don't like it because I don't like the way our country changes prime ministers every little while. But he is bringing it down, every few years. But he is bringing it on himself to a certain degree, and then it becomes an argument about who the next leader is. And the problem they've got is the front runners. Angela Rayner's not clear yet. Andy Burnham's not got a seat to stand in. Wes Streeting was an ally of Peter Mandelson. So where do they go? And it's possible that they'll have a candidate come forward from the left, and that's a danger.
And David, can you tell us how would that happen? How would that process work?
Well, so I think at the moment you would need 80 MPs for a leadership election.
So it is the MPs who decide.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
There's the point that Martin was alluding to. I think is the best one that's been made in favour of Keir Starmer, saying, what's the name? Jack Dart has been making this a lot on Facebook.
Yeah.
That actually there is an argument for we need stability and so on. Now I don't, I think Starmer is fundamentally a decent guy, but some of the decisions that have been made, not just on Epstein, I really struggle with. But whoever comes in, we will have the same economic problems. We'll have the same manifesto we were elected on, and we will have the same media. Now, under media, I mean both the hostile, quite a lot of the press is hostile and it is unreasonable in what it says, but also we have, and this is partly sort of an obsession of mine at the moment, but we have a particular problem with social media, and let's not get into that too much at the moment, but there seems to be a sort of level of organization going on in how that's used to destabilize politics and so on. So some of the problems won't go away. I think what I sort of said in jest on a WhatsApp group that we should get Hilary Benn to stand for leader, and I actually think that may have
a joke. I thought it was serious. Sorry.
No, well, I mean, but no. By the time I got on that group we're talking about, but I think there's actually some merit to it, because the other thing, one of the problems that Labour has found is that the MPs, Labour, the Parliamentary Labour Party, can't actually support the measures that are needed in order to live up to the pledge not to increase taxes on working people. That seems to me like a fairly fundamental problem.
Can I interrupt this, because I'm about to do a podcast on this, which is to make the point that a change in Prime Minister is probably not in the interests of the Conservative Party at the moment either. And I'll tell you why that is, because the Conservative Party are baying for blood, and Kemi Badenoch is talking about these things like coming to deals with Labour MPs if they want to have a vote of no confidence and all those things. And there are some signs that the economy is starting to turn around at the moment.
Mm.
So you've got, I think the Monetary Policy Committee has said that they think inflation is going to start coming down. And it's going to rapidly come down to 2%. There is, I think there's talk about consumer confidence going up and consumer spending going up, which is one of four key sort of contributors to GDP. The level of investment in the country is starting to go up as well. So all of those things are suggesting that you've got an economy that's turning round. So the Labour Party has the potential to do a number of things, but two things if they get rid of Keir Starmer. One is to bring in a lefty, and it wouldn't surprise me if it ended up being John McDonnell, by the way, but a lefty of some sort who will turn all the good work that's been done on the economy on its head. That's not in the Conservative Party's interests because it's not in the country's interests. The other option is they'll get somebody like Hilary Benn or Yvette Cooper, who I quite like, to come in, be sort of popular in the same way that Keir Starmer became Prime Minister because he wasn't the Conservative, that they would become popular because they're not Keir Starmer. And at the same time, the Conservative, the economy will start to turn around and you end up left with a popular Labour leader and an economy that's doing well in the run-up to the next general election. So I think the Conservative Party have got to be very careful with what they do here.
So to an extent, what the government's been doing has not been dissimilar to what Margaret Thatcher did, which is allowing unemployment and so on to rise, to try and sort out some of the economic stuff. The question of who the next leader will be is interesting because there isn't a clear person. I think it's very unlikely that someone from the campaign group would even get enough nominations to be on the ballot paper, and I don't think that they would win in the membership. I think maybe somebody from the soft left would have a much better chance. The other person that's been mentioned is Al Carnes, who was ex-Marine, or action man sort of type. Although he only got elected at the last election, so I think it possibly is too soon. That
might not be a bad thing with where we are at the moment, though.
Yeah, but there's no disrespect to him at all, but there is some advantage in knowing where the toilets are, knowing how the system works, that sort of thing. And the other thing I want to come on to Morgan McSweeney again in a minute and vent my spleen, but I'll open the floor. Does anybody else want to come in before?
Yeah, can I so in terms of just like a callback to how we started this, talking about the Green Party, the first person I really talked about this was David, because I trust you. You're one of the most highly principled people I know, and I trust you completely. And I told you about my defection to the Greens, and it's fair to say that you weren't overly enthusiastic about it. And one of the things you said to me was that Zach Polanski is a populist. I suppose because he pitches ordinary people against some nefarious global elite. But do you want any more evidence of a nefarious global elite than this and Epstein and all it's not just the disgusting sexual impropriety stuff, it's the financial stuff and how Mandelson was leaking him stuff which can be leaked to the markets. It's a perfect illustration. And we're saying with all of these things, it's easy to believe they don't exist, but they do exist. And for 99% of our time as a species, rich people have controlled everything. Democracy is a relatively small outlier in the last 200, 300 years. And it's really quite scary that this stuff is going on. It really makes me scared. We see it with Trump, we see it with Epstein, we see it all over. We see it with Farage, and it's just does that not give you some? Does it not make you think that maybe there is?
Let me respond to that. And this I'm afraid is going to be the first of two occasions now when I'm going to mention my PhD. So populism, I was using, and I think I said it in quite a specific way, which is as defined by a thinker called Cass Mooder, which is populism is a thin-centered ideology that says that the society is divided into two opposed groups: the elite and the corrupt elite and the pure people, and that politics should be a manifestation of the general will. You know, taking it on from Rousseau. I'm sure there's another bit, but I'm too tired and I'm on a load of painkillers at the moment, so not thinking straight. It'll come to me in a minute. The concern, so the issue I have with the way Lech Walesa has been campaigning, or the messages that are coming out, is that it has a lot of risk in it. And this is the sort of the problem with populism.
Can you give us an example of a risk?
Okay. If you're, I think if you're saying that the whole system is fundamentally broken, some people will say, and I don't think the whole system is fundamentally broken. The risk is that people will disengage completely. That is a problem, and it will drive people, towards anyone who is advocating the same thing, and that ends up helping the far right. I think the problem is it is if you like a council of despair. The bigger problem for me is that it's going on, and I'm not as sure of this, but I think you've been getting some of that with the this is what everybody thinks. So I know other parties do it. Is the stuff about the general will, the Rousseauian idea of the general will, that is incredibly dangerous, because once you get onto the general will, this is what we should do. You can justify anything.
Yeah. See, here's where I start to challenge what you've said. The Conservative Party have adopted a message in the last few weeks, and part of the reason is to set them to find a few words that set them apart from reform, and that is that the Conservative Party have started talking about broken politics. Okay. And the reason for that, I think, fundamentally, is because it's a different message to reform, which talks about broken Britain. Okay, and I do not believe that Britain is broken. I believe Britain is still full of magnificent people, and is a country with its best years ahead of it. And I think the right message is that politics is broken, and if that means the system. Then I would be at one with Lech Walesa, and so would the Conservative Party. The issue I have with the Conservative Party is you cannot talk about a broken political system unless you are going to come forward with some radical ideas that are going to fix it. And proportional representation is one of them. But one of them is about how do we get our media so that they are having good debate about policy and policy delivery, rather than just focusing on and obsessing with where the next scandal is going to come from.
So there's a question in the chat from Anthony Carpin about, are some major institutions broken, not just the political ones? So David, maybe there's some political institutions in number 10 that you feel like you want to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, and obviously you're doing a wonderful job taking over as host, Lara.
Sorry.
No,
it's really good.
So I actually thought this would come up. So in institutions, if you like, the rules, the norms that shape political behaviour. Political parties are institutions, and there is a problem with our political parties at the moment. In how they work. And I'm just going to briefly mention. I hope the concern I have with where Lech Walesa is taking the Greens. I do also like the stuff you're saying about make hope normal again. I really like some.
No, hope is here now. Hope is here.
Well, welcome back. But the
ever since Stephen joined the tree.
But that populism worries me. Having said that, there's some of that that's coming out in Labour. Some of that at the moment. So there are certainly institutions in number 10 that need changing. I don't know how number 10 works internally to comment sensibly, but it just seems from outside they do. But then there's also sort of like the things of how Parliament works, the media, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of institutions that need fixing.
One of the issues I think with number 10 is that number 10 sets itself up so it is completely isolated almost from the rest of government. And it was one of the things that nearly changed under Boris Johnson, funnily enough, which is that they nearly created and moved the number 10's operations actually into the heart of government. And I think if the right government came forward, and Boris Johnson's wasn't the right government, but it came forward and did that and pulled the number 10 operation into the heart of things, I think it would become a much better much better for government. I think the NHS has serious issues, but they are political issues. Nobody deals with the issues that the NHS faces. What they do is play about with structures on the pretense that it's progress.
Yeah,
and you know that they do that. You know, it's the same with schools. We don't do serious debate about what our schools need to do and what they need to become. What we do is have debates about whether schools can be secondary schools, you know, whether we should have grammar schools, moving towards trusts, all these things, but they don't fundamentally deal with what is the best way of delivering education and what is the education we need to deliver.
So on that point, yeah, because Anthony's asked this question, and I've been on one of Anthony's courses, and Anthony's big point is there's no civic studies in school anymore, and people don't learn about democracy. So I went on one of his courses and learned about the history of Cambridgeshire politics. We spent 2 hours in the library together, and it was one of the most illuminating things I've ever done. Yeah, so that's his personal thing, and I think the people don't learn, do they? I don't know. I'm not involved in education, but I understand those things are often curriculum.
But look at the pressure that is being put on schools consistently about we need to add this to the curriculum, we need to add that to the curriculum. Look at what has been squeezed out of the curriculum, and these things, you know, they're coming in all the time. There's a piece of legislation just come in recently called Benedict's Law, and I'm a big fan of it. My niece has driven this campaign after her son tragically died in school, and she's done an absolutely amazing job. And it's about educating and making sure that teachers are educated within schools about allergies and how to deal with serious allergies. And the issue is, yes, it's right that that's brought in, but at the same time as that happens, we need to have a conversation about what doesn't happen. And we need to have a conversation, as an example, about sports in schools and the fact that children, and you know, it's been de-emphasized, and but it's also about, you know, this is very dear to my heart. Why is it we test children every May?
Oh, so that they can go and get ready for the harvest.
Yeah, I mean,
for tracking the progress of pupils. It's about tracking.
Are we tracking the progress of teachers?
Now, no, that's a reason to test. That's a reason to examine. That's not a reason to test and examine in May. And this is the point. Why can't we have a different system where we examine at a point where somebody's ready to be examined and have a ladder of progression through school rather than nothing to GCSE over 5 years? When I was, and I could talk about this forever. When I was in the army, okay, I was an ammunition technician, okay, quite a very, very technical job. And when I did my apprenticeship, I was taking exams every couple of months through my apprenticeship. I was taking 2 exams every couple of months. And this was 1981, remember, because I'm old, right? And if I failed 3 of those exams, I was kicked off the course, okay, with a pass mark of 65%. The way they tested us, and I go back 1981, okay, was somebody went to a computer, pressed a button, and it generated an exam paper randomly. Why can't we do that now and test children when they're ready to be tested instead of when the system tells them they should be tested?
So one of the advantages, so I went for secondary school, I went to a private school for the A levels I did, which were modular. That's one of the advantages, was when you were ready to take the exam, you took the exam. It was it was an advantage, because I mean I take the point we should come on to education, but on there are big issue questions about how politics work. If it's okay, I'd just like to pull back a little bit to
the point for me about all of this, just going back, Dave, and let you take over. Sorry, take back over. Sorry, it's this sort of debate that needs to be had, though, and it's this sort of debate we need to have in a mature way, and we need to find a mechanism where there's mature public debate about these things, and mature debate in the media and in Parliament, and it just doesn't happen.
One of the things I've joked about before is that there should be a mandatory course in school all the way through called Shit You Need to Know. And it's like, this is basic stuff that you need to be a functioning person.
How to open a bank account.
Yeah, absolutely.
How to build IKEA furniture, which I've got to go back to afterwards.
But one of the things that should be in there is some basic statistics, because it's actually quite a being able to understand what someone is telling you. But what does an average mean?
That's just maths, though.
No,
it's not teach maths. Statistics is a sub branch of maths. I'm sorry.
So it is, but it's how you teach it and what you're using it for. So the point is to hopefully get people the idea that statistics isn't done by boring people with glasses in computer labs, but that it's actually a way of understanding the world around you. That it's actually a way of actually having power, in understanding what's going on.
I'd like to know what David's opinion of Morgan McSweeney is. Can we go back to that one?
Yeah.
So
she takes over, doesn't she?
This is the second time that I'm going to mention my PhD. So my PhD was civil. So the effect of civil society opposition on the electoral performance of far right parties in Britain, 2005 to 2015. My case study I looked at was Barking and Dagenham for various reasons, which is where Morgan McSweeney sort of, to a large extent, cut his teeth. He was with an organisation called the Campaign Company, later with the Local Government Association. I think another person at the Campaign Company was David Evans. And I wish I had, I wish I'd spent more time on the case study, or been able to, because there's more to do there to find out, because it seems that a lot of what Barking and Dagenham did worked. So things like changing, and remember this was when social media was just starting to happen. So like changing the council newsletter from a glossy thing to a newspaper with recipes from different people in different famous cafes in the area, so people would read it and so on. One was a thing about hairdressers, getting as giving them information about what the council was doing, because I don't, but people typically spend quite a lot of time with the hairdresser, and you're sort of a captive audience. So different things about communications and trust and so on. And I think that did actually, it's a complicated picture about why the BNP did well and then fell apart, but that was part of it. And I've never quite understood why. And some of it was fairly bread and butter issues, like making sure hedges were trimmed back and so on. But he somewhere along the line that instinct about communication and trust seems to have been lost, and that's not just at the national level. So we had a problem in Labour with anti-Semitism. If anybody thinks that it wasn't a problem, drop me a message and I'll send you a couple of links. There's stuff on my blog about the issues that we had, and a very that there was a very strong hard line taken to deal with that. I stood up at Labour Party conference and spoke in favour of that, and would again. but that sort of way of doing things seems to have continued. And so you had that with a lot of the way things were handled internally in the party, and then in the PLP after the election, and in the sort of national communications, the idea that you have to take people along with you on the journey has been lost. But also some of the stuff about being sort of direct and honest about what the challenges you face are. I wish that we had, and we still could say that, say one of the problems we have in the country is that whether, right decision, but during COVID we borrowed an awful lot of money, and it has now got more expensive just to service that debt. That and other things like Brexit, inflation, the financial crisis, and so on, and that these are affecting countries around the world. But I've never met Morgan McSweeney. I would really like to, because we've that instinct about trust and communications seems to have gone, and all you've got is be tough on the make sure the streets are clean kind of thing. And so we end up with the for instance, the stuff that Shabana Mahmood has come out with on immigration. The immigration is a difficult topic to talk about anyway. It's particularly difficult for Labour. Media context, etc. But we've got to a position where somebody in the Labour Party thought it was a good idea to brief out that the policy was going to be that asylum seekers would have their jewellery taken off them. It's not actually what the policy was, but it's the fact that somebody thought that was a sensible thing to say. So this is turning into a long rant. We need, you actually need to go and challenge. I think, Labour want to challenge some of the narratives on immigration. Even if you're just doing it on a how do we win elections point of view, you can never be extreme enough, because reform will always go one more. So all of that. The point I'm trying to make is that I hope that this is an opportunity for Labour to say, okay, there is a lot of stuff we're doing that actually we really like, by which I mean I like, and obviously that is the most important thing in the world. But there's also some stuff that's gone really badly wrong in policy terms, in party management terms, in communication terms. But hold on, Martin. I've never finished. Yeah, given that probably a new leader won't come in. Well, even if Starmer went now, it takes a while to do the elections. I'm guessing he won't go until after the May elections. That gives Labour some time to really think and say, okay, how are we going to change some of what we do, but also how we deal with ourselves internally and how we communicate. The worry I have is that it's too late.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think it's too late for Labour. However, I don't think they need to be getting rid of Keir Starmer yet. The danger with the Morgan McSweeney thing for me is that is the last buffer between the Labour Party, the Labour government, and Labour MPs, and Keir Starmer gone, and so the next fall guy has got to be Keir Starmer. But the issues you talk about the separation between MPs and the communication stuff and all that stuff, it's not that's not new. That's exactly why. That's one of the reasons Theresa May failed, albeit there were lots of underlying reasons around the fact that the right of the party was revolting, but it started to happen with Boris Johnson. And what happens is when they reach a crisis point, they start having to go into the tea rooms and talk to people. But other than that, the only place where there's communication, often between the Prime Minister and the MPs of the same party, is through the 1922 committee, or what the Labour equivalent is, the Parliamentary Labour Party. And the issues are they're not just about how politicians run Number 10 and run government. They are about how government is run. That's why I think somebody with a fresh face might be a good thing, just because they're not embedded into the same Westminster bubble phenomenon, which is part of the blight that we face, and a lot of governments face, to be honest, internationally.
I'm going to have to disagree, and I think it probably is too late for the Labour Party. And I think that a simple change of face at the top is, the public aren't stupid. They see what's going on. You just move from one person to the next. It's
it's the it's the economy. I'm not going to say the last word because that'd be calling you rude, but that'd be rude. But it's that point, and we are start to. I might be wrong in this, but so are a lot of other people. We are starting to genuinely see some signs of green shoots, and it's, to me, that's the point as a new leader, and which will overcome some of the unpopularity that is attributed solely to Keir Starmer. And the single big issue that people vote on in the elections.
Do you think he can survive the May local elections, or even the Manchester, what was it, Gorton and Denton in a few weeks' time as well? Do you think he's going to survive both those things? I don't think he is. And if he's not going to survive it, you might as well get your new leader bouncing before the elections, because I think the Labour are going to get slaughtered in the May elections.
Well, I think Gorton and Denton. Or Girton and Denton, as the Lib Dems called it, apparently. Was it the Lib Dems? Can't remember. Somebody did. Anyway, I think the Labour Party have given up on it. I think they don't think they can win it anymore.
Who is going to win it?
Well, I think that people think it's between the Greens and Reform.
Bucky say the Greens. That's all I know.
So the thing is, Labour, believe it or not, recently had actually been improving in the polls.
Yeah, but improving from what? What was the baseline?
What, this before Mandelson or after?
Before.
But we need to be clear that that's not the extent is probably different, but we need to be clear that it's not the first time that a government is unpopular midterm. It's absolutely not. Every single government is.
But his approval ratings are record low, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's why I think that he's done. I don't think he will ever get elected as prime minister again, because his lack of popularity has gone beyond anything that's acceptable and it is recoverable.
And there is a broader issue here though as well. That part of so we've got all of the economic problems and so on. Things are difficult at the moment, and all of that, and there are problems of governance, the way that the state is set up, that make it harder to deal with.
Yeah,
I think they genuinely think there is also a problem that the political parties are too big. I get the argument about a broad tent, but part of the reason that, this goes back to John Major and the Bastards, is that you have got people in political parties who, it's not that they're on a spectrum, it's that they fundamentally disagree with each other on some things. This is the thing under in how do you have Morgan McSweeney and Jeremy Corbyn in the same political party? That's not a coherent.
Until we have proportional representation, we won't be able to create a structure that facilitates that.
One of the things that I like about PR is exactly this, that it forces, rather than you living with a party that you've got to live with in government, which is what happens almost every time, is you create a situation where you form alliances at a point when you've got a really good sense of the public mood and what alliance is needed. And that's what I think changes the picture. The thing about the 2010 election and the Lib Dem and Conservative coalition was that there was a sense at that time that it had to be something different. There was a sense that austerity needed to happen because every single party campaigned on it. And they formed a coalition based on that need. And it's part of the reason why nobody would take Gordon Brown seriously when he tried to usurp the process that was going on between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems to try and form an alliance with the Lib Dems, because they knew that what was needed at that time was something different. And you form governments once you've got a sense of the outcome of an election and what the mood of the public is, rather than trying to dictate the mood of the public through an election.
So there's things there that Paul has said, which I think is politics globally is more divided. I think is absolutely true, and I'm assuming that's the Paul Wright I think it is. So hi Paul. The other thing is I want to pick up on this. Where are we at a unique point in history where PR is good for all the main parties, an anti-reform move? Could they change the system? I hope that's not how we think about it. Hey Paul. It is the Paul, I think it is. The Paul Wright, I think it is. I think we don't want to move to PR because it will affect a particular party. We want to move to some form of PR because it's a good thing in and of itself, which I happen to think it. Different versions have different strengths. I hope, going back to where we started this section on, one of the things I think could help is if some way was brought through a really pretty strict bill. Gordon Brown had some ideas in The Guardian based on a previous commission he'd done about ethics and transparency in politics, and how quickly you can move from being a minister and so on to lobbying, that sort of thing. I wonder if it would help if we sort of tried and almost outsourced it from Parliament, and sort of try to come up with I don't know, maybe this is a role for a citizens' assembly to draft a set of principles, and then take that through and say, look, we've had scandals going back, forever. But I was thinking the MP's expenses scandal. The people I used to teach, that was the first thing they remembered about politics, and I don't think that people have quite that Westminster, the parties have quite got just how much damage the MP's expenses scandal did. So I think almost doing something, so you outsource it and say we're going to take an almost unnecessarily strict approach.
I mean, the only thing I would say is we shouldn't throw lobbying into this. Lobbying in itself is not a bad thing. Okay, it is what and how lobbying takes place that is important. Okay, I sometimes do a bit of lobbying through work, and the point for me is not, if I want to get somebody to listen to what I say or a client says, I don't want to buy favors in terms of what the outcomes are. What I want is I want my client to be able to have a conversation with somebody so that they can get their point of view across, so that you've got a counterbalance. Because what you get at the moment is you get a big, broad thrust of public opinion on a significant issue, and without an effective lobbying mechanism, what you do is you make that system of representation very, very skewed. But it should be about argument. It should not be about influence.
And that is the problem. That is exactly the problem. If it's consultation and responsiveness and listening to people, that's one thing. I think when people hear lobbying, it's not so much I'm trying to represent somebody, even if I'm being paid for it. It's I'm using the fact that I went to school with Terence and he's a jolly good bloke. Is there any chance? The extent to which that happens is overstated, but as we can see, it does happen.
Oh, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it happen, and people investing a lot of money in buying tickets for events and things like that, because they know certain people are going to be there, and all sorts of stuff. But that's part of it. Is about, it's not about stopping people lobbying. It's about having a lobbying mechanism that works and is overtly transparent. And there is some stuff, if you lobby MPs. And you're involved in, I think it's ministers. If you lobby ministers, you have to declare it, and ministers have to declare it.
But there is a problem at the moment. There are paid lobbyists who are also members of the House of Lords. Even worse, there are paid lobbyists, or there are probably paid lobbyists who just haven't registered and are getting paid in a different way. There's so many gaps. Yeah. The point that Anthony has made there, so long as it's incorporated a major exercise in public democracy education, the problem is I think that would take too long.
The way I would like to do it is I would like to see whichever party wins the next general election, the precursor to that party, and the first major point in that party's manifesto should be that we will have a royal commission that looks at democracy in the UK. And do it through the Royal Commission mechanism. Make sure there is a role for individuals' voices to be heard in some way on that Royal Commission, because it can't just look at, and this is why I think reform of the House of Lords in isolation is wrong. It can't just look at PR for the House of Commons. It's got to look at PR for the House of Commons. It's got to look at democratic structures. How do we make local government more effective, and how do we create proper devolution through, say, regional government, all those sort of things. So we take a fundamental look. If we're saying our political system is broken, then a bit of super glue ain't going to fix it.
As we hit 1 hour 30, I just wanted to say how, I've been listening to you guys for many months on the podcast, and it's been a real pleasure to be with you here. But I wondered whether we might be able to focus on things more positively. And I think that a lot of political discourse focuses exactly on the negative, and on the things that go wrong, and on the ways we can criticize each other. And so I wanted to share an anecdote about a way that I think local government goes really well. Martin talked earlier about identifying the root causes of problems and tackling issues now to save money later. And last week, I attended an event which we called Huntingdonshire's Health and Wealth Building Fund. And we got to hear back some feedback from some charities that we've been supporting. And one of them was based in Ramsey. And they're called Creative Crafters. I'll give them a shout out. They're on Facebook, Creative Crafters. So it's a charity that's organizing a shop space. And anyone who's making crafts around the Ramsey area can bring their crafts in and sell them from the craft space, and also take turns manning the shop. But it also serves as a space where people can meet to learn and craft together. Now, this is an example of something that with seed funding from local government creates the charity setup, which quickly is self-funding. And it's not just about people making things and selling them. It's about mental health. It's about a rural area where some people might struggle to maintain their friendships, or to find new friends, or to find new skills, or when they go into the craft hub and learn how to craft something, that might be the only time they talk to someone that day. And so this is about identifying the underlying health inequalities, how we can attack them, and then later on, that will save money in healthcare and fewer people that the council has to look after. In terms
Can I give another example? Because the reason why I'm in politics is because maybe 9-10 years ago, HTC gave £3,000 to set up a local parkrun in St Neots. Now this is Ryan Fuller's Conservative administration, which I didn't get on very well with. But since then, they gave us £3,000, and literally thousands of people have run a 5K event. During COVID, people were already complaining because it was one of the only times that people got out and spoke to each other. It saved people's physical health, mental health, and must have saved the NHS many, many, many multiples of that £3,000, because basically seed funding for community initiatives is a clever way forward. So I completely support that, Laura. I think
I think the message is there is hope out there, and there are good people in local government trying to do good things. And we don't always get it right, but I think it's important to end on a positive message.
Yeah, but I would also say the vast majority of councillors in particular, they're great people. They've got very, very good intentions. But it's also true that part of the issue is we end up focusing on the bad stuff because that's all the media talk about. Yeah. And that's what people think politics is. I just want to say this to Paul Wright. Yeah, he's right. You can blame Stephen.
It was I'm not involved with Pocket Park anymore, but it's probably my fault anyway.
Yeah, you can blame Stephen. It's fine.
Well, anyway, I think we should probably wrap up there. Thank you to
Laura. You've got a new podcast coming out, haven't you? Soon.
I do. Cool? Yes. So I've got a new podcast called Office Politics. And we're talking to people who have been in positions of power in politics. What happens once you get elected and you have power? Do you stick to your policies and your ideals, or do you have to make compromises? How do you get to those positions of power? What do you do when you get there? It should be quite interesting. And I think we might have some special guests.
We've had 2 brilliant guests so far. So the first
And
one
me.
was Martin. No, Martin. We've only done 2 so far. Second one was Nick Johnson, who was fantastic. Who talked very frankly about his political career.
Yeah.
We are looking and trying really hard to get a major Liberal Democrat, and then we're going to have a Green and a former Independent going to be on there as well. But that's coming out as soon as I've finished editing the second episode, which I will finish as soon as I finish my IKEA tonight.
And it's worth saying, to be positive, that I thoroughly enjoyed the process of recording that. I thought it was a really, really good night, especially as we then ended up going for a few beers afterwards, didn't we, Stephen?
Yes, so it was cathartic. I think it was just talking honestly about politics and talking about the struggles of it as well.
And without confrontation, without negativity. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I thought the tone of it was fantastic, and if the rest of them can kind of come out with the same tone, I think you're onto a winner. Good.
All right. Sorry, David. Do you want to finish
it?
it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Lara, Stephen, Martin, and see everybody next time.
For a shorter version.
Yeah, possibly. And we'll finish with Gramsci. Remember, we may have pessimism of the intellect, but we need optimism of the will. Good evening.